I am Pokalai Nui, and I am your host for this afternoon, and this is Hawaiian Potpourri. Today is, and I forgot to mention, of course you all know, I assume, that today is the 25th day of August, but in the event you are watching this program on television or on your computers, you would not know it because this will be playing sometimes in the future. We have just been talking about this formation of a bridge to our futures and the formulation of the platform that is to carry us across to our futures. And is there commonality about what should this bridge consist of, or this platform that bridges our people together into our future consist of? And one of our listeners has been kind enough to begin the draft of this paper, and my apologies to those of you who may have been looking at my website trying to find this paper, and I have not posted it because we have not completed the drafting of it. In fact, just this afternoon, I had an opportunity to sit down and meet with two of our friends who discussed this and how we would be proceeding in the near future in calling meetings and using radio to promote these ideas that is contained in this paper, and perhaps even using the internet system to carry forth these kinds of discussions. So the discussion, the points mentioned in the paper are points that we have mentioned off and on in this radio program. And one is, let's establish what is a deep culture which sets forth the vision for our future Hawaii. And oftentimes, as I promoted the concept of deep culture and the need to take a look at it, we talked about Dai and Ola, domination, individualism, and exclusion, which is how most of our communities operate today, and most of the elements of our formal society operates, whether it's our educational departments or how we deal with environmental relationships, economically, how we deal with one another, politically, legally. It's always based on domination, individualism, and exclusion. That seems to be carried forth. Even the way we do sports, and if we look at the recent Olympics, it was not really joining in the celebration of looking at the excellence of our competitors or of the competitors in this program. But it was taking sides and counting up who had more gold as opposed to others who weren't good enough athletes and the rest. And so it really distracted from our ability to appreciate the fineness of these athletes and how they were able to accomplish such tremendous feats, because we were being covered over with too much nationalism and cheering for one group or another group, and we missed the boat. And even if you were looking for it, you couldn't really find it because the reporting system only highlighted one or another gold medal that the United States won, or was it really those Chinese who won it or the Russians who won it. So the whole idea of deep culture and what is the real moving base or foundation that should be moving us, and how can we share our thoughts about this deep culture and move us all to a higher plane of humanity as we share this time and space with one another. Okay, so very philosophical, very visionary, and we thought that this should be the first statement that we should begin with. Do we have commonality even there? Well, I think it's an appropriate place for discussion. And talking about discussion is pretty hard when you only have one person speaking. So we do have another person on the line, and if you would like to join in this discussion, our telephone number is 524-1080. Aloha caller, welcome to the program.
Hello, Polk. I think you're right by saying, the notion of deep culture is a philosophical issue. But I thought you did a nice job of breaking it into more practical terms by giving the example of the Olympics. Let me give an example, two brief examples of dominance, individualism, and exclusion. You talked about the rail earlier in your show.
Yes.
What we begin to see is a Supreme Court in the state of Hawaii basically overruling the current plans to move ahead. But those current plans to move ahead were really a part of a power domination of implementing rail without the consensus or the majority of the people. It was really a domination done by a few individuals in high positions of power. And the exclusion could be manifested in silencing the dissenters. There was a professor, I think, from UH who ran for mayor previously in the special election, primarily on an anti-rail platform. And there were a lot of efforts that I think were partly successful in discrediting that individual, and now Cayetano is coming up and gaining much support for that. Another practical example of DIE. At the University of Hawaii, regardless of where one stands on this controversy with the Stevie Wonder concert, you had a small group, maybe 3 people, making a decision to remove 2 administrators, the athletic director and the person in charge of the Stan Sheriff Center. So you had actually security guards assisting the removal of these people. So that's a form of police domination. The decision was made by 2 or 3 people at most. And then you had this exclusion of a gag order where you noticed that the people that were removed were not able to express their defense until legal assistance came out. So while I agree with you that the notion of DIE is a philosophical and an important philosophical perspective, I hope the viewers can just reflect on other aspects of our society in Hawaii that really mirror the DIE that you're talking about. And I'll take your comments off the air.
Okay, thank you for calling. Aloha. And yes, the philosophical visions that one promotes do have very specific applications, and the caller has used 2 examples of how it can apply in more current events. My use of the the Olympics is another example. I've used it sometimes to show what is happening in classrooms, and in those very classrooms where you attended, whether it was in Hawaii or many other places, I would suspect that you experienced these kinds of stuff, and what your children are now experiencing in many of our classrooms, all erupting out of or evoked out of the DIE mentality. And that's why it's a deep culture. It's so ingrained. Let me give you an example. And normally I use this out in Waianae, where I attended my public school education. So I walk into the class with a friend of mine, and we sit at the back of the classroom where normally many of our Hawaiians would congregate. Why? Because I think it's part of the culture, not the culture, but the experience that we had whenever we were called upon, and we spoke in a very pidgin English language, with some embarrassment, because normally the teachers were not from our groupings. They may have been flown in from Chicago or Georgia or some other places, or they may have been trained in Honolulu and not really familiar with the local pidgin, Hawaiian pidgin way of speaking. And whenever I spoke, I would always be corrected about not speaking pidgin, and don't you know proper English, etc., etc. So there was a tendency, and I went through that same experience with many others, so that we ended up sitting at the back of the class, hoping not to be picked on. Well, the teacher walks in one day and says, "Good morning, class. We are having a pop quiz today." And so she begins writing the questions on the board. It could be an excuse for her not having been prepared and now catching the students who were not prepared. So she gives us a pop quiz, and I'm looking at Ho'ipo, my friend, and saying, "Oh, wow, I'm not ready for this one." And she just smiled and said, "Well, too bad." So we're sitting in the back, and as we come across, and the teacher says, "Okay, all of you separate. I don't want you talking to each other. Nobody cheating, okay?" So she walks out of the class. I'm sitting there and I'm trying to answer question 1, 2. When I come to question number 3, I'm not sure what the answer is. So I say, "Ho'ipo, what's the question for number 3?" And she turns to me and said, "Oh, the answer is this, this, and that." And then the teacher walks in at the same time and sees Ho'ipo talking to me. And so teacher says to Ho'ipo, "Ho'ipo, what you doing? What are you doing?" And she says, "What do you mean, what am I doing? Why are you talking to Poka?" And she says, "Because Poka doesn't know the answer." So he asked me what the answer was, so I'm in the process of explaining to him what the answer is to question number 3. And so the teacher says, "You're cheating. You and Poka are cheating." And Ho'ipo protests. She says, "Oh, no, I'm not cheating. I'm helping him because he don't know the answer." And she said, No, you folks are cheating." And as a result, there's certain punishment to be attributed to us. That's how you have that specific DIE culture applied to us in the educational system. And so Ho'ipo is, and I am attempting to operate under an Ola culture, one in which sharing and caring and helping is applied even in the educational system. We are not seeing it from that larger deep culture and its impact on social and other community events. But it is an expression of the importance of deep culture, whether it's in a classroom or whether it's in a ball field or whether it's in sharing food or stories or caring for one another. It applies in our society. The deep culture affects how we do economic exchanges. Oftentimes you will find in the informal system the practice of kokua, of sharing, not because you're going to get paid back, not because this is an economic exchange, but because I know you need the help. Your car gets stuck in the middle of the road in Waianae. So it's my obligation. I got to jump out and I got to help you push your car on the side. That's that deep culture. In another deep culture, one would just find a path around that car and drive on. The more individualistic as opposed to the more community or lokahi approach in the Ola culture. So it does have very important implications. Well, anyway, what I wanted to point out is not only this discussion and engage in this discussion, but at least inform you folks, because we had announced that we were going to be raising this subject and I would be putting the paper on the internet. I have failed to be able to really address myself and Michael to put it on the internet. So my apologies if you went to the internet to look for it under HawaiianPerspectives.org. But it will be on, and I intend to have it on before the next week program. But we also talked about meeting, being able to sit and just have a discussion. And oftentimes having a discussion over the radio is not the most effective because I cannot get the feedback and the interaction among people in a more discussant arena. So we are trying to look for that kind of arena, and as we move closer and closer to those opportunities, I'll let you folks know, and if you have the opportunity, you can come down to a meeting place and we can sit and really talk about these values, and not only the values, but how do we apply it to the next 4 points to the issue of self-determination, especially for the native Hawaiians here in Hawaii. Issues that have too long been laid aside as life went on, as we talked about economics, or as we talked about need for better education for our children and the rest, but we continue to set aside the issue of self-determination and the fact that those who presently govern Hawaii are governing a stolen possession, government, a land base. The presence of the Americans in Hawaii are really based on illegitimate foundations. Do we address it, or do we just not pay attention to it and just move along? So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the impact on education, on economics, on our environment, the ecology, and how do we change attitudes, or must we change attitudes with regards to the ecology? And what about energy and how we survive, and what kind of energy do we turn towards in our future? So those will be some of the discussions. I want to let you know that we will maintain contact, and for now, through this radio program, I will try to bring you up to date as we get closer to some gatherings that we can actually meet eye to eye, face to face, and engage in these discussions.
Kaulana na pua o Hawaii, Kupa ama hope o ka aina, Iki mai ka elele o ka loko ino, Pala pala anunu me ka paka. Pane mai Hawaii moku o ke ave, Koku ana honoa o Pi'ilani, Ka ko'o mai kaua i o mai.